I can't explain how it happened, only that it did. It started at the company holiday party, a night I had barely wanted to attend in the first place. Between juggling work, managing the kids, and keeping up with the never-ending tasks of home life, dressing up for an evening of small talk felt like the last thing I wanted to do. But my husband, Daniel, had encouraged me to go. "You've been working so hard," he'd said. "You deserve a break." So I went. The party was held in the ballroom of an upscale hotel. It was the kind of event where everyone pretended they weren't secretly networking, where the drinks flowed freely, and the music played just loud enough to drown out the awkward silences. I spent most of the night hovering by the bar, chatting with coworkers and sipping on a glass of wine. It was around my third drink that Adam, a colleague I'd always gotten along with, approached me. Adam and I had always had an easy rapport. We worked on several projects together, and I'd always appreciated his sharp wit and laid-back demeanor. That night, though, something felt different. We started talking about work, how busy the past quarter had been, the stresses of balancing deadlines, and then the conversation drifted to more personal topics. "I don't know how you do it," he said, leaning against the bar. "Work, kids, everything. You make it look effortless." I laughed, brushing off the compliment. "Trust me, it's far from effortless." But his words stuck with me. It had been so long since anyone, especially Daniel, had noticed how much I was juggling. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it. The rest of the night is a haze of laughter, clinking glasses, and stolen moments that blurred the boundaries I had promised myself I'd never cross. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I ever thought I was capable of. But somehow, in the quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd and the music, Adam kissed me. And I kissed him back. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my kids laughing downstairs. The familiar hum of Saturday morning cartoons played in the background, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe everything was normal. But then the memory of the night before came crashing down, and I felt the weight of what I'd done. Daniel was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, a smile on his face as he teased the kids about syrup wars. He looked so happy, so completely unaware of the secret I now carried. I couldn't bring myself to face him. Instead, I locked myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror and wondering how I had let this happen. Over the next few days, I tried to push the memory of that night out of my mind. I told myself it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment that didn't mean anything. But the guilt clung to me, heavy and unrelenting. Every time Daniel kissed me goodbye or asked about my day, I felt like a fraud. And every time my kids looked at me with their innocent smiles, I wondered if they could sense that something had changed. I thought I could bury what happened, pretend it was nothing more than a fleeting moment I'd regret for the rest of my life. But then Adam texted me. "Hey. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to acknowledge what had happened. But ignoring him felt impossible, like avoiding a storm that was already brewing. We met at a quiet coffee shop near the office, sitting at a corner table where no one would recognize us. "I've been thinking about that night," Adam said, his voice low. "I don't want to make things harder for you, but I can't stop thinking about it." His words made my stomach churn. "It was a mistake," I said firmly. "It never should have happened." Adam nodded, but his expression was unreadable. "I get it," he said. "But I need you to know that I care about you. And if you ever need to talk, I'm here." I left the coffee shop feeling more conflicted than ever. That evening, as we sat together after putting the kids to bed, Daniel turned to me with a concerned look. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Is everything okay?" My heart raced. "Yeah," I replied quickly. "Just tired. Work's been overwhelming." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't entirely believe me. Desperate for clarity, I confided in my best friend, Mia. We met at a park, sitting on a bench while my kids played nearby. I made a mistake, I blurted out. At the holiday party. With Adam. Mia's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. She waited until I'd poured out the whole story before speaking. You need to figure out what you want, she said finally. This isn't just about you. It's about your family. You need to be honest with yourself, and with Daniel. Her words felt like a punch to the gut, but I knew she was right. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, carrying the weight of my guilt while pretending everything was fine. I had to tell Daniel. I didn't know if our relationship could survive the truth, but I couldn't let the lie fester any longer. Telling Daniel the truth felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff, not knowing if I'd land or fall endlessly into the void. I rehearsed the words in my mind over and over, trying to find a way to soften the blow. But the truth was brutal, and there was no way to deliver it gently. The next evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I asked him to sit with me in the living room. He looked at me with concern, his brows knitting together as he sensed the weight of what I was about to say. Daniel, I began, my voice trembling, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you sooner. He leaned forward slightly, bracing himself. What is it? I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. At the company holiday party. I made a mistake. I kissed someone. A coworker. And it was wrong, and I regret it more than I can say. I'm so sorry. Daniel stared at me, his expression frozen in disbelief. The room felt unbearably quiet, the weight of his silence pressing down on me like 1,000 bricks. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and strained. Who? Adam, I whispered, barely able to say the name. But it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, and it's not something I ever want to happen again. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room as he ran his hands through his hair. How could you do this? He asked, his voice breaking. To me, to us, to our family. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to find the right words. I don't have an excuse, I said. I wasn't thinking. I let myself get caught up in a moment, and I hate myself for it. But I love you, Daniel. I love our family. And I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. For the next hour, Daniel swung between anger, hurt, and disbelief. Was it just a kiss? He demanded. Yes, I said firmly. It never went further than that. How do I believe you? He asked, his voice filled with pain. How do I trust you again after this? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was apologize, over and over, hoping that somehow my sincerity would reach him. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Daniel didn't leave, but he didn't look at me the same way. He avoided eye contact, his responses to my attempts at conversation short and cold. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for the kids, but they could sense the tension. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, felt heavy with unspoken words. Desperate to save our marriage, I suggested couples therapy. At first, Daniel was resistant. Why should I go sit in a room and talk about this with a stranger? He asked bitterly. Because we need help, I said. I can't fix this alone, and I don't want to lose you. After several days of silence, he finally agreed. Walking into the therapist's office felt surreal. Daniel and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us filled with tension. The therapist, a calm and composed woman named Dr. Harris, began by asking us to share why we were there. I'm here because my wife betrayed me, Daniel said bluntly. And I'm here because I made a terrible mistake, I added, my voice trembling. And I want to make things right. Dr. Harris nodded, her gaze steady. Healing from infidelity is one of the hardest things a relationship can go through, she said. But it's not impossible. It will take time, honesty, and a willingness to confront some uncomfortable truths. Over the next few sessions, Daniel and I began to unpack the layers of our relationship. He shared how my actions had shattered his trust, and I admitted how lost I had felt in recent years, how I'd buried my own needs under the weight of our responsibilities as parents and partners. I didn't cheat because of anything you did, I told him during one session. This isn't your fault. I let myself drift, and I made a choice that I will regret for the rest of my life. But why didn't you talk to me? He asked, his voice raw with emotion. Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling instead of turning to someone else? I was scared, I admitted. Scared of being vulnerable, of admitting that I wasn't happy. Therapy didn't provide instant answers, but it gave us a space to begin rebuilding. Dr. Harris encouraged us to focus on small steps, honest conversations, moments of connection, and time spent as a family. Slowly, Daniel began to let his walls down. He started asking me questions about my feelings, and I answered them with complete honesty, even when it hurt. One day, I received an unexpected text from Adam. I heard things have been rough. I just want you to know I'm sorry for my part in this. I stared at the message, my chest tightening. I didn't want to open old wounds, but I also felt the need to make it clear that our interaction was over. Thank you for apologizing, I replied. But I'm focused on my family now. Please respect that. One evening, as we tucked the kids into bed, Daniel reached for my hand. It was the first time in weeks that he'd initiated physical contact, and the gesture brought tears to my eyes. I'm still angry, he said quietly. But I'm willing to try. For us. For the kids. His words felt like a lifeline, a sign that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. If the truth had been a storm, the weeks that followed were the quiet but grueling aftermath. The house was still standing, but everything inside felt scattered and broken. Daniel's willingness to try, to even consider forgiveness, was more than I'd dared to hope for, but I knew that hope alone wouldn't be enough. Rebuilding trust wasn't a simple task, and every small step felt like walking across a minefield. I didn't know what might set off an explosion of anger or what moment might soften the tension that hung between us. In therapy, Dr. Harris suggested we create boundaries and goals, rules to help us navigate the uncertain terrain of rebuilding trust. Daniel was clear and firm, I need complete transparency. No more secrets. No more lies. I agreed without hesitation. I gave him access to my phone, my emails, anything he wanted. It wasn't about control, it was about proving that I had nothing to hide. Dr. Harris also encouraged us to spend intentional time together, but in ways that didn't feel forced. You're not going to fix this by pretending everything is fine, she said. Focus on small, honest moments of connection. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel suggested we sit outside on the back porch. The night was cool, and the stars were faint against the city's glow. We sat in silence for a while before he finally spoke. Do you ever think about what it was that made you drift? His question was like a punch to the gut, but I knew it was fair. I think I stopped talking to you about how I was feeling, I admitted. I let myself get buried in the day-to-day, work, the kids, everything, and I stopped asking myself what I needed. Daniel nodded, his gaze distant. I guess I didn't notice because I was doing the same thing. The admission felt like a crack in the wall between us, a small but meaningful shift. If there was one constant, it was the kids. They were too young to understand what was happening, and their needs kept Daniel and me tethered to reality. We still worked together to pack lunches, help with homework, and navigate the chaos of bedtime. In some ways, it felt grounding. No matter how broken we were, our responsibility to them remained unchanged. But there were moments when their innocence made the weight of my actions feel even heavier. Mommy, why don't you and Daddy laugh as much anymore? My daughter asked one evening as I tucked her in. I kissed her forehead, tears stinging my eyes. Sometimes grown-ups have big things to talk about, I said. But we love you very much, and that will never change. Rebuilding trust came with its own set of challenges. There were times when something seemingly small, a glance at my phone, a mention of work, would set Daniel on edge. "Are you still talking to him?" he asked one evening when I received a work email during dinner. "No," I said firmly. "I haven't spoken to Adam since the text I showed you." He nodded, but the doubt lingered in his eyes. It was a painful reminder that trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. Amid the tension, there were glimmers of hope. One weekend, we took the kids to a nearby park for a picnic. Watching Daniel push them on the swings, his laughter ringing out as they shouted for him to go higher, I felt a pang of both guilt and gratitude. When he sat down beside me on the blanket, he said, "I miss this. All of it." "Me too," I replied, my voice soft. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness, but it was a step toward remembering what we were fighting for. In therapy, Dr. Harris asked us to think about what we wanted for the future. "I want to feel like I can trust her again," Daniel said. "I want to believe that we can get back to a place where this doesn't define us." "I want to show you that I'm worthy of your trust," I said. "And I want us to be stronger, not just for the kids, but for ourselves." One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Daniel handed me a small notebook. "I've been writing down some of my thoughts," he said. "Things I don't always know how to say out loud." I opened the notebook to the first page, my heart pounding. The words were raw and honest, a mix of anger, sadness, and hope. "I hate that this happened. But I also hate how blind I was to the cracks that were forming. I don't know if I can forgive her yet, but I want to try because I still love her. And I think part of me always will." Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. "Thank you for sharing this with me," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to write to you too. I think it might help." Over the next few weeks, we exchanged letters, using the notebooks as a way to express the things we couldn't always say in person. The process was painful but cathartic, each entry peeling back another layer of our emotions. The anger didn't disappear overnight, and neither did the guilt. But with each conversation, each shared moment, we began to rebuild, not the relationship we had before, but something new. One evening, as we stood in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, Daniel turned to me and said, "I think I'm ready to forgive you. But it's going to take time." His words felt like the first rays of sunlight after a long, dark storm. "I'll wait as long as it takes," I said, tears streaming down my face. The journey toward forgiveness felt like learning to walk again. Every step was tentative, every move filled with uncertainty. Daniel's words, that he was willing to forgive me, were a light in the darkness, but they were also a reminder of the work that lay ahead. Trust wasn't something I could rebuild overnight. It would take time, consistency, and unwavering honesty. Our life together didn't return to normal immediately. If anything, it felt like we were creating a new version of what normal could be. It was fragile, but it was ours. Our kids, blissfully unaware of the turmoil beneath the surface, remained the glue that held us together. Whether it was cheering them on at their soccer games or helping them with their school projects, the shared responsibility of parenting forced Daniel and me to interact in ways that felt almost natural. One Saturday morning, we took them to the local zoo. Watching their excitement as they pointed at the animals, their faces lighting up with joy, I felt a pang of gratitude for the small moments we were still able to share as a family. As we sat on a bench eating ice cream, Daniel turned to me and said quietly, "This is why I'm trying, because they deserve us at our best." His words were a bittersweet reminder of what was at stake. While some days felt hopeful, others were marked by tension and missteps. Daniel still struggled with moments of doubt, and I couldn't blame him. One evening, as I scrolled through emails on my laptop, I noticed him watching me out of the corner of his eye. "Who are you emailing?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with suspicion. "It's just work," I replied, turning the screen toward him so he could see. He nodded, but his unease lingered. Moments like these were a reminder that trust was still a work in progress, a fragile thread that could snap if mishandled. Dr. Harris continued to be a guiding force in our journey. In one session, she asked us to share what we appreciated about each other, a question that caught both of us off guard. "I appreciate how much Daniel loves our kids," I said. "And how he's willing to fight for our family, even when it's hard." Daniel hesitated before speaking. "I appreciate how Caroline has been trying. I can see that she's making an effort to be honest, and I know that's not easy." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was a start. As the weeks passed, Daniel and I began to find small ways to reconnect. We started having dinner together after the kids went to bed, taking the time to talk without distractions. One evening, as we sat at the table with glasses of wine, I asked, "Do you remember when we first moved into this house?" He smiled faintly. "How could I forget? We spent the first night eating pizza on the floor because we didn't have any furniture yet. And we stayed up all night talking about our plans for the future," I added, the memory bringing a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "That feels like a lifetime ago," he said, his expression softening. "It does," I agreed. "But I'd like to believe we can still have those kinds of nights again." Determined to strengthen our bond, we began creating new memories together. One weekend, we planned a family camping trip, something we hadn't done in years. Setting up the tent, roasting marshmallows over the fire, and telling stories under the stars reminded us of the simple joys we'd once shared. That night, as the kids slept in the tent, Daniel and I sat by the fire in comfortable silence. "Thank you for this," he said quietly. "It feels good to just be." I nodded, my heart swelling with hope. "We'll keep building this, one step at a time." While creating new memories was important, we couldn't ignore the past. One evening, Daniel asked, "Do you think about him?" His question caught me off guard, but I answered honestly. "No," I said. "What happened with Adam was a mistake, and I regret it every day. He doesn't matter to me, what matters is us." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I needed to hear that," he said. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Daniel made a joke about my terrible aim when throwing things into the trash. "You could miss a basketball hoop from 2 feet away," he teased. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help laughing. The sound of our shared laughter felt like the first crack of light breaking through the clouds. "I've missed this," he said, his smile lingering. "Me too," I replied, my heart feeling lighter than it had in months. Our progress wasn't linear, there were still hard days, moments of doubt and tension. But there were also moments of connection, of shared hope, that reminded us why we were fighting to rebuild what we had. One evening, as we tucked the kids into bed, Daniel turned to me and said, "I think we're going to be okay." It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. Each day after Daniel's quiet assurance, "I think we're going to be okay," felt like walking across a bridge. The ground beneath us wasn't always steady, but for the first time in months, we were moving towards something instead of away from it. Trust was still fragile, but it was growing. The laughter that had returned to our home, the shared moments of quiet understanding, the small ways we showed up for each other, all of it felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly falling into place. One evening, as we sat on the couch after putting the kids to bed, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you ever think about why this happened?" I hesitated, the weight of his question pressing down on me. "I've thought about it a lot," I admitted. "I think I was running on autopilot for so long, trying to juggle work, the kids, our life, that I stopped paying attention to what I needed. And I didn't let myself talk to you about it because I was scared of what it might mean." He nodded slowly. "I think I was on autopilot too," he said. "I didn't notice that you were struggling. I didn't ask the right questions." "It's not your fault," I said quickly. "This was my mistake, and I'll carry that. But I think we both got lost somewhere along the way." His eyes softened, and for a moment, we sat in silence, the air between us heavy but not unbearable. Daniel's need for transparency remained a cornerstone of our rebuilding process. At first, it felt strange to share every detail of my day, to hand over my phone without hesitation, but over time, it became second nature. One afternoon, as I showed him a work email chain, he surprised me by saying, "You don't have to do this every time, you know." "I want to," I replied. "Until you feel like you don't need me to anymore." His expression softened, and I could see a flicker of the trust we were slowly rebuilding. Our kids, oblivious to the complexity of what we were navigating, became our greatest source of joy. Whether it was movie nights on the couch, trips to the park, or impromptu dance parties in the living room, their laughter reminded us of what we were fighting for. One Saturday, as we built a blanket fort in the living room, Daniel turned to me and said, "I think this is the happiest I've seen them in a long time." "It's because they see us trying," I said, smiling. "They feel it." As the months went on, Daniel and I began to redefine what it meant to be partners. We weren't just parents or roommates or people trying to patch things up, we were learning how to truly support each other. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Daniel walked into the kitchen as I was making dinner. "Go sit down," he said, taking the spatula from my hand. "I've got this." I started to protest, but he gave me a look that stopped me in my tracks. "Caroline, let me take care of you for once." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Okay," I said, stepping back. One of the biggest challenges was re-entering social situations as a couple. Work events, family gatherings, even casual outings with friends felt charged with the weight of what had happened. The first time we attended a family party together, I could sense Daniel's unease. He stayed close to me, his hand resting lightly on my back, as if to remind himself, and me, that we were in this together. When someone asked how we'd been, Daniel answered with surprising honesty, "We've been working through some things, but we're stronger for it." I glanced at him, my heart swelling with gratitude for his courage and his willingness to move forward. Our wedding anniversary came around, and for the first time since everything had happened, Daniel suggested we celebrate it. "I know we're not where we used to be," he said. "But I think it's important to mark how far we've come." We went to a small, cozy restaurant downtown, nothing fancy, just a place that felt warm and inviting. Over dinner, we talked about our favorite memories from our years together, the things that had drawn us to each other in the first place. "I fell in love with you because you're the kind of person who always sees the best in people," Daniel said. "And even though this has been the hardest thing I've ever been through, I still see the best in you." Tears filled my eyes as I reached for his hand. "I don't deserve you," I said softly. "Maybe not," he teased, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm glad you're mine." Rebuilding wasn't a linear process, and there were still hard days, moments of doubt, flashes of anger, and lingering pain. But there were also moments of joy, connection, and shared hope. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the kids chase fireflies, Daniel turned to me and said, "I think we're going to be better than we were before. Stronger." I nodded, my heart full. I believe that too. Life isn't about perfection, it's about resilience, growth, and the willingness to fight for what matters most. As I look at our family now, I see not just what we've been through, but what we've built together, a partnership rooted in honesty, a home filled with laughter, and a future that feels full of possibility. This is the life we've chosen to rebuild, and I'm endlessly grateful for the chance to keep walking this path together. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as Daniel and I continued rebuilding the life we'd almost lost. It wasn't a perfect journey, there were setbacks, moments where old wounds resurfaced, and days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But through it all, there was progress. We had created a new rhythm for our family, one that embraced the imperfections of our past while focusing on the possibilities of our future. Our home wasn't just a place to live, it was becoming a sanctuary again, a space where we could laugh, grow, and, most importantly, heal. One afternoon, I received an email from Adam. The subject line simply read, "Hope you're doing well." I froze, my heart pounding as I stared at the message. It was short and polite, asking how I'd been and mentioning a new opportunity he'd taken at another company. He didn't ask to reconnect, and there was no hidden implication in his words, but the message still felt like a test, a moment where I had to choose between transparency and secrecy. Without hesitation, I showed the email to Daniel. He read it carefully, his expression neutral. "What do you want to do about this?" he asked. "I want to delete it," I said. "And I want you to know that I'm committed to us. He's not a part of my life, and I want to keep it that way." Daniel nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "That means a lot." I deleted the email in front of him, and in that moment, I felt a small but significant shift, a step toward rebuilding the trust we'd been working so hard to restore. As time went on, we found joy in the milestones that marked our children's growth. School performances, sports games, and family outings became opportunities to celebrate the life we were creating together. One evening, after our youngest performed in a school play, Daniel turned to me as we walked to the car. "Watching them reminds me of why this matters," he said, his voice soft. "Why we keep trying." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "They're our best reason," I replied. Inspired by our progress, Daniel suggested we take a family vacation, something we hadn't done in years. "We need a change of scenery," he said one evening as we planned the trip. "Something to remind us how to have fun together." We settled on a week at a cabin by the lake, a place where we could disconnect from the noise of daily life and focus on each other. The trip was everything we needed. We spent our days swimming, hiking, and playing board games, and our nights gathered around the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the water, Daniel turned to me and said, "I feel like we're finally getting back to us." His words filled me with hope. "I feel it too," I said, leaning against him. Life, of course, wasn't without its challenges. There were days when work demands pulled us in different directions or when the pressures of parenting tested our patience. But instead of retreating into ourselves, we leaned on each other. We'd learned the importance of communication, of checking in, even when things felt difficult. One night, after a particularly stressful week, Daniel surprised me with a simple gesture. He'd cooked dinner, lit candles, and set the table for two. "I figured we could use a little break," he said with a smile. The evening reminded me of the early days of our relationship, when we'd make time for each other no matter how busy life got. On the anniversary of the day I told Daniel the truth, I wrote him a letter. It wasn't long, but it was heartfelt, a reflection on the journey we'd been on and a promise to keep building the life we'd reclaimed together. When I gave it to him, he read it silently, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at me and said, "I think this is the first time I've felt closure. Like we've turned a corner." His words felt like a gift, a reminder that while the road had been long, we were finally reaching a place of peace. As the seasons changed, so did our outlook. We began talking about the future in a way that felt exciting instead of daunting, dreaming about trips we wanted to take, goals we wanted to achieve, and the kind of legacy we wanted to leave for our kids. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Daniel said, "You know, I didn't think we'd make it through this. But now, I can't imagine giving up on us." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached for his hand. "Thank you for believing in us," I said. "For giving me another chance." "You earned it," he replied, his voice steady. Rebuilding a relationship after betrayal is one of the hardest things a couple can face. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and an unrelenting commitment to growth. As I reflect on our journey, I'm filled with gratitude, not just for the forgiveness Daniel extended, but for the strength we found in each other. Our marriage isn't perfect, but it's real. It's a testament to the power of resilience, the beauty of second chances, and the unwavering love that binds us together. This is the life we've built, and it's stronger than ever. As time passed, the fragile bridge we'd worked so hard to build transformed into something stronger, something that could hold the weight of our shared lives. The pain of the past didn't vanish entirely, but it became a part of our story, a chapter that reminded us how far we'd come and how much we had to be grateful for. Daniel and I didn't just repair our marriage, we reinvented it. We became partners in a way we hadn't been before, more honest, more present, and more attuned to each other's needs. One of the most profound changes in our relationship was the rediscovery of joy. We started doing small things to bring light back into our home: Friday night pizza parties with the kids, spontaneous dance-offs in the kitchen, and quiet mornings spent sipping coffee together before the chaos of the day began. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Daniel turned to me and said, "I didn't realize how much I missed this, just laughing with you." "I missed it too," I replied, leaning into him. The trust we'd been rebuilding brought with it a deeper sense of partnership. Daniel and I began to share more of the emotional and mental load that came with raising our kids and managing our busy lives. One day, as I juggled a work deadline and a school project for our oldest, Daniel walked into the room and said, "Let me take over. You've done enough today." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. It showed that he saw me, not just as his wife, but as someone who deserved support and care. The milestones that marked our journey became moments of quiet celebration. The first time Daniel told me he trusted me again. The first time we planned a trip together without hesitation. The first time our kids said, "Mommy and Daddy are so funny again." Each of these moments felt like a victory, a testament to the work we'd done to rebuild what had been broken. One of the most significant lessons we learned was the power of vulnerability. We stopped hiding our feelings from each other, even when they were messy or difficult to express. One evening, as we sat on the porch after a long day, Daniel said, "There are still days when I think about what happened, and it hurts. But I've realized that it doesn't define us. What matters is what we've built since then." His honesty brought tears to my eyes. "I'll never stop trying to make this right," I said. "You already have," he replied, taking my hand. Reflecting on the journey we'd been through, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The betrayal, as painful as it had been, had forced us to confront the cracks in our foundation and rebuild something stronger. "I used to think forgiveness was about forgetting," Daniel said one evening. "But I've realized it's about choosing to move forward, even when the past is still there." His words resonated deeply, reminding me that love isn't about perfection, it's about resilience, commitment, and the willingness to grow together. As we celebrated another anniversary, Daniel surprised me with a scrapbook he'd been secretly working on. It was filled with photos, notes, and memories from our years together, including the difficult but meaningful steps we'd taken to heal. "This is our story," he said, handing it to me. "It's not perfect, but it's ours." I flipped through the pages, tears streaming down my face as I took in the love and care he'd poured into the project. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything. Our journey hasn't ended, it never will. Love is a constant process of growth, forgiveness, and choosing each other every day." As I sit here writing this, Daniel is in the kitchen helping our youngest with a school project, his laughter ringing through the house. Our kids are thriving, our home is full of life, and our partnership is stronger than ever. This is the life we've built together, not perfect, but real. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Life isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them and using those lessons to create something beautiful. Our marriage is proof that second chances are worth fighting for, that love can endure even the hardest storms, and that the strongest bonds are forged through resilience and hope. Here's to the journey, and to the endless possibilities of what comes next.